This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Tim Lozier of Verse Solutions about benchmarking your risk management and compliance activities.
Plus, are employee evaluations a waste of time and money? Well, we'll find out when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by Hexagon Metrology. Hexagon carries the widest range of quality brands. With its extensive support network, Hexagon is also your partner. Hexagon Metrology. We are metrology.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for November 13th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
That he is, and I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richman. I'd like to start the show this week by addressing a growing problem that has implications for not only those of us working in the quality profession, but for everyone who wants access to information that can lead to better medical outcomes. Healthcare's Deadly Data Problem is the name of an article written by Leonard DeVolio that initially ran last month on the Healthcare blog. We linked out to the piece in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And now we publish a lot of articles in QDD on the topic of big data, and we've talked about it certainly on the show enough times. Certainly there are risks to not properly utilizing the information that's gathered second by second around the world. And those risks are for businesses really not being able to dig through those mountains of data to find an issue that has real relevance to the bottom line. But for those trying to improve healthcare, the inaccessibility of key information is literally a life and death matter. The root of the problem is electronic medical records, or EMRs. In theory, having a patient's records available digitally is a great thing. However, as DeVolio writes, EMR systems were primarily designed for three purposes. First is financial reimbursement, second is narrative communication among clinicians, and third is legal protection. Nowhere in there do you see a usage that would lead to improved quality of outcomes for patients. It's kind of ironic. DeVolio uses an example of the fairly common surgical procedure that's officially known as a prostatectomy, which is the removal of the prostate. In almost all cases, this operation is performed as a treatment for cancer. However, there are some critical decisions that surgeons make during this procedure in terms of how much or how little tissue to remove, and that affects things like the recurrence of cancer and nasty side effects like impotence or incontinence. These decisions made by surgeons are driven by multiple factors, not only those of the patient's history and specific diagnosis, but the surgeon's training and preferences as well. Now, think about this. For a patient facing prostate cancer and the surgical removal of his prostate, one would think it would sure be great to have access to data, right, showing how his particular case and his particular surgeon matched up to certain outcomes, both positive and negative. That would inform the patient's decision making. Heck, it might, maybe, would even inform the surgeon's decisions too. Maybe, maybe not, who knows. But it might. Of course, access to electronic health records at this level of granularity just isn't feasible at this point in time. And a lot of that has to do with the limitations of the forms and the documents, but a whole heck of a lot of it has to do with the inconsistencies in the way that the data is entered. You know, garbage in, garbage out.
Well, I think there's another issue also.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of issues. But those are two really big ones that DeVolio talks about. Better health records designed to track outcomes and improve performance would certainly be a godsend, not only for patients facing prostate surgery, but for thousands of other procedures and conditions. And we're not there yet, but we could be. And when medical industry accidentally kills hundreds of thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of people each year die from medical mistakes, I don't think that day really can come too soon. And what was the other one you were going to...
I think there's just resistance. I mean, there still is resistance.
Among the surgeons, yeah.
Sure,
yeah.
And doctors and hospitals and so forth. I mean, they don't want people looking...
over the shoulder.
Over the shoulder too much.
Think about the patients. Think about the patients.
Oh, sure,
the ability for the patients to know that a certain surgeon removes a lot of tissue and you may become incontinent. I mean, that's really important to know and make your decision as to what procedure or how radical the procedure you want to undergo. And because it's your body. You're the customer in this case.
Right.
You can kind of demand what you want and find a surgeon that will match up with that. But you can't now because the electronic medical records, health records aren't there yet to be able to support that.
Yeah.
Interesting story.
Well, for more information on this story, you can check out the story link down below or just below the video player. And as always, all the news items and feature articles that we cover on today's show are available right down there below the player page. Okay, when I say the word compliance, what does that mean? it's a pretty broad term. It can mean compliance to financial obligations, quality and safety, or general compliance to any regulation that is driving the organization. As our next guest, Tim Lozier, points out in his article, Benchmarking Risk and Compliance, how do you add up? I'm sorry, Benchmarking Risk Compliance, how do you add up? That's the name of the article. As Tim says in his article, when you look at the current state of quality management and safety management with respect to compliance, most of the challenges arise in the overall operations and processes that govern companies' adherence to common standards and initiatives. So with that in mind, Lozier's company surveyed companies to answer simple questions about their overall compliance processes and activities related to quality management or safety management. Based on these results, they were presented with a score that identified the basic grade of the health of their compliance activities. Here to talk about that survey and some of its implications is Tim Lozier, Director of Product Strategy for Verse Solutions. Morning, Tim.
Morning, guys. How are you?
Pretty good. Well, tell us a little bit first about the survey you conducted. What were you trying to learn specifically, and who actually was surveyed?
Sure. So when we actually started this whole process, we really were looking more or less for a free tool that our audience could actually just grade their compliance. And so the goal was simple. It was just to ask a few easy questions about typical compliance and operational activities that they do within their business, and ultimately score and see how they can potentially improve. So what we found was that we collected a lot of data on these events, and we were able to look at this and say there were certain aspects that really met well with respect to compliance, but there were also areas where they weren't excelling as best as they could. And so one of the things that came out of this was the difference, or the combination of operational excellence and compliance. So like I said in the article and in the webinar that we're going to have next week, compliance is really about doing what's required of you. It's adherence to some sort of standard, some sort of regulatory initiative, whereas operational excellence is really doing what's desired, the end state at which your company wants to be at to continuously improve and foster collaboration. And so while we found that a lot of companies did really well at adhering to compliance in terms of document management and training and regular auditing, when you start to look down and drill into some of the more operational excellence concepts, they were incurring a lot of risk in terms of actually achieving some of those goals. Process management was a big risk for them, as well as was timeliness of corrective action. So there's a combination that companies really need to look at as of what's required in compliance versus what's desired in operational excellence.
Well, let me jump in a little bit here. I mean, you mentioned something that's kind of interesting. You mentioned timeliness of corrective actions. Why is that? Why is timeliness in corrective action so hard to achieve? I mean, that's kind of, corrective action is kind of one of the cornerstones, I think, of a quality management system.
Yeah, and we were surprised by that as well. So we figured that a lot of companies would be doing corrective actions as it is required, as among other things. But what happens is that we found that the idea of a corrective action had a very strong compliance notion to it. So a lot of companies would start that process of doing a corrective action, and then when there's the need to initiate action plans, rely on other stakeholders, escalate when needed, delegate when needed, they found that they were having some frustrations around that. And I think it goes down to the whole idea of understanding what a corrective action really should be. A lot of times corrective action, maybe not necessarily generally in the quality area, but with other areas within the business, see it almost as I have to do this kind of stigma. Whereas really, if we start shifting our mindset to saying, well, corrective action really is something that we can achieve continuous improvement on, and we can really benefit from the results of a corrective action, both from an operational excellence standpoint and from just shifting your mindset to really that continuous improvement. And that's something that I think, when we look at the new ISO 9001 2015 standard, there is that mind shift, the mind shift that goes into more of a risk-based thinking kind of mentality to continuously improve and drive leadership.
Well, let me jump in there, Tim, because I'm glad you mentioned that. What exactly did you learn from the survey about how companies are dealing with risk? And as you mentioned, ISO 9001 2015 certainly addresses risk-based thinking.
Well, yeah. So obviously, with the new standard coming out, there's this whole concept of risk-based thinking, which is kind of what exactly is risk-based thinking. I think a lot of companies are trying to struggle and wrap their head around, the generalities of that concept. So what we ended up doing, we ended up creating another tool. Really, we created this risk tracker tool, which is really just a simple risk form that allowed people to quantify different events that happen within their organization, calculate the risk, and maybe look at what the actions are. And so it's something we're going to talk about next week as well. But what we found was that the concepts that were really strong in compliance around managing your processes and doing audits and executing on corrective actions were also the areas where risk was the highest. So one of the highest risks we saw was around activities around process management. So it's interesting to see that companies have looked at the concept of compliance, but the risks that associated with them are still inherently high. And so one of the things that we are striving to educate on and to provide guidance on is, how do you start that risk journey? How do you really start thinking about risk in your daily operations? And really, that kind of thought process is going to allow companies to shift their mindset from compliance or what's required to true operational excellence, and ultimately known as what's desired. And that's the whole goal, and it's really interesting stuff that we've found.
Okay, thanks, Tim. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more next week. As Tim mentioned there, we have a webinar coming up next Thursday, November 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, benchmarking risk in compliance with your peers. How do you measure up? So Tim Lozier of Verse Solutions, thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll see you next Thursday at the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, and all of you out there, be sure to keep an eye on your email, because we'll be sending you some email invitations to come out and join that webinar. Okay, well, our next guest on the show today has quickly become an old hand at Quality Digest Live. Kelly Graves is among our most popular columnists, and I think for good reason. He writes about the challenges of performance excellence and quality improvement from the human side of the equation. His latest article, which you can see right there, which is "The Subtly Named Employee Evaluations Are a Waste of Time and Money." Kelly's always very subtle.
That's so.
Appeared in Quality Digest Daily, as you can see right there, earlier this month. Now, Kelly uses his training in psychology to help executives better lead their people and thereby achieve better outcomes for their organizations and everyone within it. He's the CEO of Internal Business Solutions, a consultancy that specializes in these very issues. So, Kelly, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, how are you?
I've been doing great.
Good, good. Well, let's get right down to it. Okay, so formal employee evaluations are a waste of time and money, as you say. Well, so what's a better way of doing it? I mean, you have to give feedback. You have to support your employees and coach them and train them. So how do you do it better?
Okay, well, let me take one step back real quick. If we dissect the word employee evaluation, first, evaluation, when you look that up and define it, it means judgment. Mm-hmm. So right there, you've already lost the game. I'm judging you. Mm-hmm. Second thing is it's employee judgment. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's one way. That's an incompetent model. It's something that we've brought over since the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Okay, so really a better way of doing that is to say, how can we, if you're my manager, how can we improve? Now that's a dialogue, okay? Right. So what I've termed my model is management and employee development improving plans or systems. That's because if an employee, if you're my boss and I'm the employee, if you're trying to help me improve, that's part of your job, is to train, to coach. And it can't be done once a year. It needs to be done on an ongoing basis. And the best way that I've found to do that is to open up a dialogue and say, okay, today we're going to sit down and talk about the things that you're doing well and things that you're doing not. But also, as my boss, what am I doing well and what am I doing to improve on? Right. Okay, so now we have a dialogue, instead of the employee saying, you know what, you're my boss, I have to rely on you for my mortgage, for my family, whatever you say, whether I like it or not, yes sir. You know, that's not development. Okay.
Well, I remember. When I first began to work, 2-3 decades ago. The employee review was so formalized. It literally was on my anniversary every year for like the first several years of my employment. And to be honest, I kind of look forward to it. Maybe because I was a great employee. I don't know. But I looked forward to getting the feedback. It was like it wasn't done in real time. It was like, my boss seemed to store it up, and she wouldn't tell me when it was happening, but maybe 8 months later I'd find out I did something that wasn't very good and I should have been changing it. So obviously that's a problem, but again, what's the better way of doing it rather than that annual thing? You do it in real time, you do it as it's happening.
It's best to do it in time.
Yeah.
In fact, when I work with companies, when we first hire an employee, I say, what we're going to do in the first week is, at the end of that first week, is what are we doing well, what are we not, how do I need to manage you differently, what precisely do you need to do? So now, and then at the 2 week, and then 30 days, 60 day, 90 day. So the person gets used to constant feedback, but also the manager gets used to constant feedback, because it's really a team thing. If it was like a coach saying, okay, at the end of the year, I'm going to tell you what we need to do to win games, he wouldn't be a coach for very long, right? And so and so what we want to do is, like right now, instead of the employee evaluation being done for me, and on July 15th, let's do it now. Let's find out what I need to improve on and how you're going to help me. And then let's follow up in 30 days. What are the 2 or 3 things that you and I choose to focus on and say, okay, Kelly, you need to improve in this area, and this area. What are you going to do as the employee? You're going to do much of the heavy lifting. But conversely, what is my manager going to do to help me succeed in that? That's guidance, that's maybe mentoring. And those things can be done 2 minutes in the hallway. They can be done 3 minutes here, 4 minutes there. So it's not this official test. It's this dialogue that we have back and forth. And as a result of that, we have more trust, we have more communication, and we catch things 10 times quicker. Now, when you multiply that times a group of people, let's say a small organization of 50, you can see where we can shift an organization very quickly.
How does this, I like the idea. I think a lot of people would like this idea, probably even managers.
Right.
But from an HR perspective, they're going, okay, now legally, we've got to keep track of this, that, and the other, because what happens if we want to fire an employee because they're not performing, or what about raises, or what about equity between different. How do you, when you don't have something kind of rooted in a formal procedure, how do you keep legally and HR folks happy?
This is even more appropriate for HR. Again, to go back in history, what evaluations have really done is become a legal document so we can document people out. Okay? That's all it's become, really. Under the guise of, let's develop our people. It doesn't develop our people. It saves our hind end. Okay? So what we want to do is, when you have, it's still the same form. Okay? We still have the questions, but we approach it differently. It's more of an us thing. So now, with the clients that I use this with, if we do have to terminate John Smith, we've already worked with John Smith multiple times. We've shown on, November 15th and, these different dates that we sat down and we did this kind of training, we did this kind of coaching. It's documented all the way through. So if the time comes when we really do have to terminate John Smith, we still have all the documentation. In fact, we have better documentation. What's even better than that is, as we're going through this process, John Smith knows I'm missing the marks. They're working with me, they're guiding me, they're coaching me, and 8 times out of 10, about 70-80% of the time, that person will quit before they get terminated, which reduces our liability 100%.
Right.
Okay, so it's the style in which I've put this together that is more you and me working together as a team, which most companies spout teamwork. Not teamwork. It's teamwork, but with the old style. Okay, so this is a whole different way of approaching us and how we can really develop each other.
Let me ask you about ego. I mean,
Yeah.
because managers, what you're talking about is really a 360-degree review that the employees can also help the manager manage better and lead better. But managers have ego. I mean, a lot of managers have a lot of ego. And how do you get over that? I mean, a manager might say, come on, you're a rookie or you're somebody lower in the organization. Why are you telling me what I should be doing? I mean, how do you impart to the manager the importance of getting over the ego and accepting the information?
That's where it starts from the top down. Ego has no place in business, just like ego has no place on the football field. Do you want to win the Super Bowl or do you want to score touchdowns?
Right.
That's where you have to sacrifice for the team. And if we have a manager with undue ego, then we have a manager that needs his professional development from the CEO or the executive.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Kelly Graves, thanks for joining us again, as always. Kelly, of course, as I mentioned, is one of our most popular columnists. If you want to check out Kelly's articles, you got about half a dozen with us now, or more.
Yeah, every month.
Every month for most of this year. So check out on our search bar, right? Content by Kelly Graves, and you can see all of Kelly's articles right on there. And Kelly, we'll look forward to more stuff from you in the coming months and back on the show coming up as well. All right, we're going to move on now to our Tech Corner. I got a great Tech Corner for you here today. This one is from our friends at Olympus. Rob Bellinger of Olympus comes down to our studio often to look at their great stuff. And this one is the STM7 series from Olympus. So Dirk and Rob, take it away.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Rob. Thanks again for joining us. So STM7, what are we looking at?
This is our new model measuring microscope, or sometimes known as a toolmaker's microscope. It's comprised of a measuring stage and components. I'd probably like to show some of the hardware configurations of this.
Yeah, I think we've got a video we can run that kind of points out some of the features. Sure.
Yeah, we have a video that goes over that. So this system has a motorized focus that we have displayed here, a very high resolution digital camera for live image display, a display on the side that actually shows your XYZ coordinates, and you can reset these to do quick point-to-point measurements. We also have reflected light with a laser autofocus system for Z measurements accuracy. The bright field illumination with our compound objectives. We can also utilize our measuring objectives that give you more working distance, or toolmaker objectives. The most important part is our XY stage here that has encoded, and it's all based on a granite platform for vibration isolation.
Cool, interesting. So that's the, you say this is basically what we're used to calling a toolmaker microscope, right?
Toolmaker microscope, it's for critical part measurements and quality assurance on your parts for dimensional, or it could be for repair type imaging.
And as usual, this has got a very simple Olympus interface, right?
Yeah, so a lot of this new features are ran through the software that Olympus has designed for the measuring microscope. Utilizing our high refresh rate camera, we can now do part measurements on the screen and utilize a lot of features in the software for repetitive measurements and auto edge detection. So that's something I want to go through here. We've actually created a measurement list, so we can replay this list, and when this comes up, it actually will prompt the user, how many times do we need to take this measurement? So you might have 10 of these parts on the stage. You would replay this 10 times and take the same measurement for all 10 parts, because they all have the same exact holes drilled in them and such.
So you've pre-programmed a measurement routine.
A routine, yep.
Okay.
I like to call it a macro sometimes, but yeah, this routine will guide the operator to take certain measurements, and with the auto edge detection capability, it'll automatically mark the points for them as they move through it. So let's do this one real quick. It's a short one. We'll just do a single replay. And what it's going to come up with first, asking us to mark the points along the edge to define the rotation alignment of our part. So it's on the screen here, you can see the line profile, and as we move across, it will auto mark the edge with a red crosshair here, and we can just mark our get points.
So it's automatically found the edge for you.
Automatically found this edge based on a contrasting technique. So we mark the left side, and we're going to go all the way to the right side of our part here, so we can quickly mark the right side, giving us the most accurate rotation alignment.
And I notice the part isn't perfectly aligned on the stage.
Purposely did that for this demo, yeah. Okay. So it's not perfectly aligned, and it's marking this automatically on the edge here now. And this edge scanner bar goes across almost our entire field of view, so we don't have to work with bringing the part right to the exact position. It marked it automatically. Now the next thing we have to do is mark the left side edge of the part, and this will give the software the definition of where the part is located on the stage. So we'll mark our left side edge, and then we'll go to the top of this and mark the final point up here, giving us not only the final position, but the rotation as well. So it marks this edge right here.
Yeah, what people aren't seeing, there's a little tiny, you can probably see the big red crosshair,
red
but there's
crosshair.
actually a little blue crosshair that's actually finding the edge,
Yep,
right?
finding the edge right here.
Yeah.
So we hit get coordinates. And once it's done with that, you can see in our graphic here on the right side, it marked our 2 lines, and it then automatically marks the angle of rotation and our origin point, which is the bottom left corner of our part.
And that's why you took 2 points on,
So
on the bottom. You could get that.
2 points for rotation
Okay, gotcha,
alignment.
right.
Yep. So now that we have our origin and it knows where the part's located, this system will actually guide the user to drive to the location where the measurement point's going to be taken. And right now we're measuring a circle. So all the user has to do is drive following this red dot. Once they get to the point, then they need to drive it down. And moving the stage here. Once it gets close enough, it automatically brings up that auto edge detection again.
So you didn't do anything right there. It saw this is a circle, this is what I'm supposed to measure, and boom, it finds it.
Because we programmed it to do this. We
Okay.
know that it's going to be measuring a circle, so it's looking for a circle. And as soon as it comes into the field of view and marks to the point it needs to, it's going to bring up this definition. This one's marking 10 points. We can mark up to 100 points. And we just hit get coordinates here, and it automatically measures our circle. Now the next point I want to measure is a point between a height point, 2 points in Z height.
Z, okay.
So this system does XYZ measurements, and we use an autofocus, so it'll automatically focus on the surface of our part. And we'll drive down to the edge here so we can measure off the edge of our part to get part thickness. So as soon as I reach our edge point here, it'll automatically mark. We'll make sure we're focused with the laser on the surface. We'll get our Z coordinate, and then we'll move down again and refocus to the bottom surface. You notice our part went out of focus now.
Oh, so now you're focused on the
Focused
stage.
on the stage.
Okay.
So we'll get total part thickness. So we hit get coordinates here. And
So it's
now-
measuring from the stage to the top of the part.
to the top of the
essentially.
part, getting us Z height or thickness. So once we're finished, it'll let you know replay is finished. And all of our measurements show up in the bottom right corner here. The measurements, if we scroll up, you can see the circle measurement and our height measurement. One of these is in red, the diameter for the circle. That's telling us right away that that circle measurement was out of tolerance and it failed.
So along with programming the what you're going to measure in the part, you also put in or could put in the tolerances
Put in the
as well.
tolerances for every measurement that you want to do on the part, so it gives you quick notification of pass fails. And once you have all this measurement data, you probably want to output it to Excel with a single button click here. Notice even in Excel, the tolerance that it was out of tolerance shows in red.
Okay, so you just actually opened up an Excel table.
Dropped
Okay,
it right into an Excel table.
Okay.
And one of the other things the software has built in is report templates that can be customized. They can drop the measurements in the report templates along with captured images that you want to take pictures of. One of the other features that I want to show real quick is the ability to capture a good image of different focal planes. So let me move to a different part I have on the stage here and refocus on that. So if we look at this, we have the letter A that's embossed above the surface of this. So if we focus down, we can see the surface. If we focus to the top, we see the letter, but the top is focused, bottom's not. We have a function, an optional software component called Extended Focal Imaging, or EFI. If we go into this, it allows us to bring focus to our top surface, and we just mark that we have the upper limit position. And now we go to the lower point of focus down to the base, and we say our lower limit position. And since this is a motorized focusing system, we just hit start, and it's going to go through and capture all of those images automatically for us, creating a one in-focused image.
So you manually focus on your top, manually focus on the bottom. It records those.
You mark those points, yeah.
Okay, and then it
records
just
the Z
scans
value.
it through all the way through them. Okay.
And it scans all the way through, and once it's done, it'll compress the image into one.
Okay.
That's
Oh, there
all
it
in
is. Okay.
focus. So it looks real nice. These images are great to use in your reports, which you can now save out and insert into your report document, or you can just save it out as a standard image.
So a way you might use this is giving you the height from is giving you the height of that letter, for instance.
It's giving you it in focus as a picture.
Yeah, but you also can take measurements of that as well. So you can also say how high it is as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
We could go back and mark the point on the surface, zero it out, or mark it in our software and measure down to the base and get exact heights of that point.
And then along with that, you have an image that is completely in focus. I can go along with that measurement,
in the report.
for instance. Okay, a report. Okay.
One of the other features that the optional capabilities of the software is some stitching capability. So if you have a part that you want to take and stitch together a large area and have one picture of it, you can do this in the software as well by just driving the stage around, and it automatically captures all the pictures together for you.
Okay.
To create a large view.
All right.
So.
And what's basically the market for this?
So this has a broad market range. It can go from medical device, looking at small medical device parts, or even semiconductor parts, looking at critical line widths, to large part manufacturing. So this is a 50 millimeter by 50 millimeter stage, but we also have up to a large 300 millimeter by 300 millimeter stage, so you can fit larger size parts. So everybody from valve manufacturing, looking at races and bearings, can put parts on here and do critical part measurement and Z height measurement as well.
Okay. This is motorized. Is there a manual version of this as well?
Yeah, so all of the stage options, we have either a motorized focus or a manual focus option available. And the software is also optional, but you lose some of the capabilities if you don't have that. If you just want to use the readout on the side and do just quick point to points, that's possible as well.
Okay, so the highlights are programmable. The measurement routine is programmable, so a user just has stepped through the operation. Right?
Absolutely. So using the programmable measurement features, operators will step through. Some variability of their measurements are going to be reduced from the auto edge detection, and utilizing the autofocus unit will improve repeatability for height measurements as well, taking the operator's placement out of that.
And of course, edge detection, there's always value in that because that also decreases variability as well. Yeah, okay. Oh, Rob Bellinger, again, STM7 from Olympus, right?
Great, yes.
Okay, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
Right, man.
Yeah, have a good afternoon.
Well, there you go, the STM7 inspection and measurement series from Olympus, system from Olympus, I should say. Rob Bellinger joining us there. Dirk, thank you for doing a fine job as always with Tech Corner. And Rob, of course, thank you for coming down and doing that demo for us again.
And we didn't even break it when we were bringing it into the studio.
We
awesome.
almost broke our door, but got it in and we'll get it back out. Great, good stuff. All right, well, that's our show. Before we close, we'd like to offer thanks to today's sponsor. The newly rebranded Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence is committed to helping you control your processes, enhance the quality of your products, and increase efficiencies. They empower you to stay one step ahead of a changing world with their wide range of product offerings, nearly 200 years of expertise, and an extensive support network. Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence, where quality comes together. For more information, just click on the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right. And also, once again, thanks Tim Lozier for coming on this show. And be sure to catch our webinar next Thursday.
That's right.
On Thursday, November 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Benchmarking risk and compliance with your peers. How do you measure up? And of course, thanks again to Rob Bellinger from Olympus.
And of course, to Kelly Graves too.
And Kelly Graves.
A lot of great guests for you
today. All right.
All right, that's our show. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week for another great QDL, another great week of QDD starting on Monday.
So long.
Bye.
Four, three, two, one, fire.